Welcome. In this presentation, you will learn about the historical development of action research. Action research is an established research method used in educational settings across many professions since the mid-20th century. Action research is professionals examining their own practice in order to improve it. The first research practice that can be labelled as action research was based on the philosophical pragmatism of Dewey. The concept of action research can be traced back to the early works of the progressive American philosopher of education, John Dewey, in the 1920s. John Dewey disputed the practice of scientific research methods used in the field of education. Dewey's philosophical ideas, especially his criticism of the separation between knowledge and action, and his request for linking theory and practice, influenced the development of action research. Action research evolved in the 1930s in the US through the works of Kurt Lewin. Lewin was interested in how people could, through self-education, learn to enable themselves to improve their situation. He was concerned with social problems. His extensive research on social issues played a major role in the development of action research as a methodology. His work included social experiments in factories aimed at increasing productivity. He felt that industrial output would increase if workers were involved in the decision-making about how the workplace was run. He developed an approach called dynamic group work to facilitate social change and addressed conflict, crisis, and change within organizations. He changed the role of the researcher from an observer to an involved participant in the group. In 1933, Kurt Lewin met with social psychiatrist Eric Trist at the London Tavistock Clinic for Human Relations. Trist was impressed with Lewin's theories and his pioneering action research approach. As a result, the Tavistock Clinic adopted Lewin's work and began to use action research to study industry and group behaviour. Both Lewin and Trist affirmed the role of group relations as a basis for problem solving. They both believed that decisions are best implemented by those who help make them. In the 1940s, Lewin saw action research as an approach to research that is orientated to problem solving in social and organizational settings, and that had a form that parallels with Dewey's conception of learning from experience. He proposed that action research involves an ongoing cycle of planning, acting, observing, and reflecting on change. In 1946, Lewin coined the term action research in his paper Action Research and Minority Issues. In the paper, he describes a research method that did not separate the investigation from the action needed to solve the problem. Like Dewey, he found that experimental methods in many cases were inadequate and unsatisfactory. Like Dewey, he believed in the idea of educational research, in which teachers are active participants, not just users or objects of research. In 1945, John Collier, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, used action research to improve race relations in the Indian reserves in America. Lewin and Collier's idea of action research came at the same time, however, independent of one another. While Collier's idea did not sufficiently develop, Lewin's idea had much greater influence on the professional and scientific public. In the early 1950s, Stephen Corey of the Columbia University was the first to adopt and apply Lewin's idea of action research in the field of education. In 1953, Corey defined action research as the process through which educators study their own practice to solve their personal practical problems. As an educator, he believed action research in education would bring about change because educators would be involved in both the research of their everyday practice and the application of the research results. Despite the promising outcomes of Lewin's theories, action research was in decline by the end of the 1950s as the result of the emergence of new research models. Action research was described as unscientific, little more than common sense, and the work of amateurs. Experimental quantitative research began to dominate. The goal of educational research is to be objective. Despite initial enthusiasm, the idea of the teacher-researcher was suppressed and replaced by so-called large studies, in which there was a clear division between researchers and practitioners. However, action research emerged from development work in low-income countries. Paulo Freire emphasized the importance of both reflection and action, and the necessity for the oppressed to actively participate in the research process through dialogue, rather than be given information by well-meaning outsiders. In Brazil at that time, literacy was a requirement for voting in the presidential election. In 1962, Freire developed an adult literacy program where 300 sugarcane workers were taught to read and write in 45 days. This allowed them to reflect on their social situation and become empowered. These ideas influenced educational action research all over the world. Action research became popular in Britain in the 1970s due to the influential work of Lawrence Stenhouse. Stenhouse, an educational researcher, recommended action research in the field of education through the Humanities Curriculum Project. Stenhouse encouraged teachers to take an active role in the process of research to improve their educational and classroom practice. He believed that teacher-initiated research is an effective way of involving teachers in the institutional decisions and policies. In the 1970s, action research began to profit from the enormous upheaval in qualitative research and the growing popularity of interactive research methodologies. Action research focused on issues that are specific and personal to the teachers in their own classroom and school, with the primary goal of development of the teacher and effective teaching practice. Educators began to see that many research projects did not have practical application to their own classrooms. Action research allows teachers and researchers to work together and includes the teacher within the research process. Action research emphasizes the involvement of teachers in problems in their own classroom and has as its primary goal the development of the teacher rather than the acquisition of general knowledge in the field of education. By the mid-1970s, action research had evolved into 4 types or trends. Traditional action research stemmed from Lewin's work on issues within organizations. Contextual action research stemmed from Trist's work on relations between organizations. Radical action research was influenced by Paulo Freire, who believed you can understand the world only by changing it. Educational action research had its foundations in the writing of John Dewey. He believed educators should be involved in the problem solving. In the 1990s, there was a growing interest in the application of action research in health, social care, and education. Stenhouse ideas were extended by John Elliott, the coordinator of the Centre for Action Research. Elliott continued the tradition established by Stenhouse by moving beyond objective curriculum research to a focus on the concept of teachers researching their practice. He also influenced action researchers in healthcare settings. At the same time, at the University of Bath, Jack Whitehead was developing a different form of action research that placed the teacher at the centre of their own inquiry, asking the question, how do I improve what I am doing? Nowadays, action research is a respected social research practice. One of the reasons for its popularity is its common sense attitude to real-life problems. Action research cycle is a self-reflective, systematic, data-driven and accountable process. The diversity of sources that inspire action research are reflected in the areas in which action research has taken root. In education, action research has become a valuable tool for job-embedded professional development of teachers. Thank you for listening to this podcast on the history of action research.